Okay, welcome everybody. I'm going to get started and people can trickle in as they come in, I guess. I just want to say thank you. My name is Jody Houston. I manage our circular procurement file with the Circular Innovation Council. Thank you for taking the time today to join us. Before we get started, I just want to mention that we have allotted time at the end of the presentations for questions. Feel free to add your questions to the Q&A function, as they come to mind so that you don't forget and we don't miss them. And if we run out of time at the end of the session, we will ensure that we gather your questions and we get answers to them, and then we'll send it out to you and the rest of the folks on this webinar. So the Circular Innovation Council is pleased, in partnership with its broad and diverse membership, to welcome all of you to our new knowledge series, Circular Economy Concepts into Action. But before I provide some more insight into the series, there's a lot of new names that are joining us today. So I wanted to take an opportunity to tell you a little bit about us. The Circular Innovation Council was actually formerly known as the Recycling Council of Ontario, which was established in 1978. The initial focus of the organization was on waste reduction and resource efficiency, and the more efficient use of resources, which are all central tenets of the circular economy, just not called that back 40 years ago. The organization played an instrumental role in facilitating the partnership between government and municipalities to create the Blue Box program that we all know and participate in today. And the organization was awarded the United Nations Environment Program Award for that work. We are a unique membership-based organization, and our members span the entire value and supply chain. So we have governments at all levels, we have industry producers, collectors, processors, we have educators, academia, corporations, small to medium-sized enterprises, and even individuals who are part of our membership. And we work in three primary buckets of activity. We have policy and advocacy, we have resources and services, and then program and pilots. And some of our activities, not all of them, are there listed on your screen. So I do invite you to visit our website, circularinnovation.ca, and take a look at the range of activities and issues that we are heavily involved in. So in terms of this new series, it's going to be offered bi-monthly and consists of virtual knowledge sessions that will provide a variety of frontiers that are transitioning our country towards a circular economy. They're going to reflect the diversity of market-based solutions and broad works of the Circular Innovation Council. And our aim for this series is really to bridge knowledge and continue to bridge knowledge and showcase our members' circular business models and how they help move Canada towards fully embracing a circular economy. We are already well into the planning stages for the rest of the series for 2023, and we'll be sending out information as soon as possible. And of course, we appreciate your feedback on this session, but also let us know if there are topics that you would like us to cover in the future. And then with today's webinar, the aim is to bridge knowledge around procurement and how it works within government, as well as how it works with procuring agencies on behalf of the government, and then linking it to one of our members' circular business models. So with that, I'm going to actually invite my colleague, Shirley Ouellette, who is our membership-based and systems manager, to say a few words.
Sorry about that. Thanks, Jody. We're so happy to see many people join us for our first knowledge series. I've had the pleasure of speaking to many of you as members, and I look forward to meeting those of you that are not currently members. By becoming a member of Circular Innovation Council, you join a group of organizations that come together to discuss common concerns, including government policy initiatives or industry challenges. One of the biggest values as a member is your ability to capitalize on our strength of bringing a variety of stakeholders together to solve common issues. If you wish to learn more about membership with us, please reach out to me directly so we can set up a call. We hope you really enjoy this first session. And as Jody said, we'd love to get your feedback. We will be sending out the topics for the next few sessions very soon. With that, I'll hand you back over to Jody. We've got a very full agenda today, and Jody's going to introduce our speakers.
Yes, thanks, Shirley. So I'm going to start by introducing Manny. Manny, I apologize for the pronunciation, Argiropoulos. You can correct me on how I said that. I apologize. But Manny has been working for Public Services and Procurement Canada, Ontario region for more than 20 years. He's held various positions ranging from real estate advisor to geomatics project manager, and is currently the chief small to medium-sized enterprise stakeholder engagement with Procurement Assistant Canada in Ontario, in the Ontario region. Manny also delivers seminars that assist and inform suppliers on how to do business with the Government of Canada and how to navigate the federal procurement system and how to utilize the federal procurement websites, which is Buy and Sell and Canada Buys. Our next speaker, Mark Smith, is a procurement technical specialist with Defence Construction Canada, head office contract services team. Mark started with Defence Construction Canada in 2009 and it has been in procurement services since 2015. In 2019, he took on the role of Indigenous Procurement Specialist, a role created in response to the federal government's 5% mandate, which is fantastic. Mark is also the main point of contact for Indigenous businesses seeking to learn more about doing business with Defence Construction Canada. And he has also helped author a joint Indigenous procurement strategy to identify strategies that would be effective in helping the Department of National Defence meet that 5% target for infrastructure and environment programs. Our final speaker, Dr. Darryl Moore, has been working with Kal Tire for over 5 years and is currently engaged in sustainable materials and technology. Darryl has more than 20 years in consumer good industries and is primarily focused on circularity in tires, the impact of both carbon emissions, value retention, and rubber and associated technologies. Additionally, Darryl teaches at the University of Cape Breton in the MBA in Community and Economic Development. So before our speakers get going, I just really wanted to take the opportunity, and I'm going to run through this quickly because our time is going by quickly. But I really wanted to level set understanding of the circular economy. Just simply to say that we know that our typical way of business primarily exists within the linear economy where we extract resources, we feed them into production cycles to be consumed, and then all of that, the products then typically end up as waste when, no longer of use. This isn't smart, it's unsustainable, and we all know that it's creating a bit of mess, environmentally, socially, and even economically. Our recycling economy improved on that linear economy by introducing resource recovery and material efficiencies, but it still exists primarily within that linear system. The circular economy is pretty much like an overhaul of the system. So it's moving past recycling, which is only considered at the end of life, and it's shifting those considerations to the forefront so that we can change the way that we design, produce, and consume materials so that, the materials and the resources that end up in circulation stay in the system and are then able to create that closed loop, which is what the circular economy is all about. And when you have a closed loop system, you reduce or remove the need for virgin materials, you protect biodiversity, you will reduce waste, you will reduce carbon emissions, especially those that are associated with production and consumption, and you will create new business models and economic opportunities that benefit society. So these are direct and indirect benefits of the circular economy. And in speaking about the circular business models, there's 5 that underpin the circular economy, and they are based on the ideas of longevity, reuse, repairability, upgrading, sharing, material recovery, and so on. And each material is unique. And as small to medium-sized enterprises, you can innovate and deliver your products and services using one or a combination of these models. And when you really start to dig into it, you will find out that these business models actually support and drive each other. So for enterprises that want to do business with government, and as us as an organization, we are advocating that government procure with these business models in mind, because it's a very simplified and effective strategy to transition to the circular economy. So the point that I really want you to take away is that it's important for you to start to take stock and understand of these business models and see where the opportunities are to slowly incorporate some of these aspects into your business models and service offerings. And then obviously, if you have any questions or want to talk through it a little bit more, we're happy to help. So please reach out. For us and for obviously my work, procurement is the key. The circular economy, or is key to the transition to the circular economy, which represents a $4.5 trillion economic opportunity. So to unlock that, we need to utilize procurement. It's underutilized right now. It's untapped, but it's a powerful lever to kickstart this transition. It's pretty much like a golden thread. And when you purposefully, or when you use it purposefully and strategically, it can create many opportunities for innovation, as well as sustaining benefits for enterprises, especially in the communities that they serve. So there's multiple benefits here that the circular economy provides. I won't go through them just in the interest of time. The slides will be shared with all of you afterwards. But just to pick out a couple, the circular economy is an opportunity to increase your brand attractiveness. It will, there's an opportunity to reduce dependence on non-renewable and scarce resources, and that provides a buffer against volatile markets and reduce and resource costs. And then the most important piece is that it supports the government in delivering on their policy objectives like climate change mitigation and adaptation. So for companies who embark on this journey, involving in tandem with government requirements is obviously essential. However, procurement can be a bit of a knot in a golden chain. So understanding how it works is equally important, which is going to now lead us into our first presenter, which is Manny, who's going to introduce you to the federal procurement system. Manny?
Thanks, thanks very much there, Jody. Appreciate the introduction. You did a good job. My full name's Manny for short, Argiropoulos, and I am the Chief of SME Stakeholder Engagement. I want to thank CIC for the invite here today. We'll have a brief overview, kind of a teaser for you today to get you started and spark the fire to maybe stimulate you in getting involved in federal procurement and beginning your journey, or assisting you in navigating the system of wherever you may be in your federal procurement journey. Next slide, please. So I represent a group called Procurement Assistance Canada. We are a small office within the larger umbrella of Public Services and Procurement Canada, the common service provider to other government departments, common services like pay and pension, translation, accommodation services, portfolio management, and the like, and procurement being one of the larger ones. We are the main buyers of goods, services, and construction for all the government departments and ourselves as well. So the office was created in 2005 out of a need to make federal procurement more open, fair, and accessible to all Canadians and businesses alike, especially SMEs who were finding it far more difficult to get involved in the process. So the office in Ontario was created in 2006, and we inform, assist, and engage you through sessions like here today to tell you how the process actually works, because it can be a little bit daunting and cumbersome. We try to demystify it for you, but we get involved as best as we can to try and get you to the front door and allow you then to open the door and make decisions on your own. But essentially, we're also here to reduce barriers for small businesses, and in particular, diverse businesses in several underrepresented category areas, and one of them being on the green side in clean tech. Barriers, if you're having issues with federal procurement here in Ontario region, or you're from other regions across Canada, you may be located in Moncton or Halifax or out west, you need to bring the bring the barrier to the attention of our office as we work with our procurement teams in Ottawa, our policymakers that will try to make changes to procurement to make it more efficient, more streamlined, and accessible. Next slide, please. So we're here today to understand a little bit about the fundamentals, as you heard Jody mention, is how to get oriented and who are the players, why we buy, what we buy type of thing. The session is quite large. Normally, it's a 2-hour workshop that we offer, and you'll get more details at the end about how you can connect and get more details. This will be a kind of like a teaser, as I mentioned, just to get you started. As a business, as a small or medium enterprise, or even a large organization, we don't discriminate against anyone. There's always something that people would need assistance on to get involved in federal procurement. So how do you get started? Next slide. So there are a lot of opportunities for small and medium enterprises in the federal procurement system. A lot of you are not aware of that. There's a lot of myths about federal procurement. We have a whole session on demystifying the process and debunking a lot of those myths. You should note that Canada is one of the largest buyers of goods and services. You saw Jody's stats, up to 400 billion overall on public sector buying all across Canada. Canada's contribution to that is about 23 to 25 billion dollars annually. It is a large marketplace. Other jurisdictions buy a lot as well, the provinces, territories, the broader public sector, school boards, mass sector, I think they're called, municipalities, academia, school boards, and hospitals in Ontario region. They represent 200+ billion dollars in spend. So there's a lot of opportunities on public buying, but on the federal side, it's through Public Service and Procurement Canada as the main buyer, and other departments. There's about 100 other departments that buy goods and services on behalf of their own departments. And we look to use small and medium enterprises where we can to award those contracts. Next slide, please. So based on the introduction, there are some key things that businesses need to understand in regards to doing business. We are one of the largest buyers, as I mentioned, and we award a lot of contracts. Over 500,000 contracts are awarded on an annual basis by the Government of Canada. A lot of them are at least 2 million of those. 2 million transactions are done by credit cards. So purchasing for low dollar opportunities. So there's a niche area for small and medium enterprises to look at. And these are contracts less than $100,000, for example, or 40,000 for services and 25,000 for goods. And we'll talk a little bit about that. Next slide, please. So the main players are Public Service and Procurement Canada, who's our department, who purchases on behalf of other government departments when their delegation of authority is exceeded. So there's about 100, 105 or 10 other federal departments and agencies that can buy on their own up to certain dollar value amounts, as I mentioned earlier. If they exceed those amounts, then they have to come to Public Service Procurement Canada, who acts as a purchasing agent on behalf of them, because their minister's delegated authority would have been exceeded. So if they exceed that, they have to come to PSPC, and then we look at the best method of supply to use and help them to try and procure those goods and services. However, it's very important to understand that we strive to achieve openness, fairness, and transparency in everything that we do. So it's usually a competitive process that we need to look at, and then to award a contract for best value to the Crown through that. The most important piece of information that all of you need to walk away with today is that last bullet on this slide, which is we have to follow federal laws and Treasury Board guidelines of how we do procurement. If there isn't a policy to be used, we can't procure goods outside of the policies that we're able to utilize to procure those goods and services. And for that matter, up until very recently, there haven't been too many set-aside programs that the Government of Canada had to benefit underrepresented groups or social enterprises or green and that kind of sort of thing. So our laws govern that. We have an introduction to a new policy that was introduced in 2021, which is our social procurement policy, and we'll be touching base a little bit later on that as well. But those laws are drive how our procurement teams can actually buy. We can't circumnavigate those rules. So it's not like private sector, straight up forward, I meet you, we like what you do, we purchase what you have, and away we go. Here we have to be open, fair, transparent, and have to make it competitive. Next slide, please. How much does the government buy? Well, increasing bidder diversity is very important as well, and I alluded to this very briefly. So there are a number of business initiatives that are going on in federal procurement right now that are trying to drive diverse buying and to support diverse buyers within our federal procurement system. One of them is the procurement strategy for Indigenous businesses. It's the only true set aside the government of Canada currently has, is to help allow opportunities for Indigenous businesses to benefit from federal procurement. So if we're doing procurement within a within a First Nation or an Indigenous community, or it's adjacent to what we're doing, we would consider a procurement set aside to be done there to allow Indigenous businesses to bid on and win those contracts. And recently, last year, there was an announcement the government of Canada made to allow a minimum of 5% of spend for certain departments to be allocated to Indigenous businesses. That's the 5% mandate. And from there, a lot of departments are looking at ways to leverage federal procurement terms and regulations to allow them to procure using Indigenous businesses. Better buying is another initiative, and this includes modernizing procurement with a simpler and more accessible procurement system, and advancing the socioeconomic goals by creating more opportunities for equity deserving groups. So better buying is our plan to make procurement processes easier, faster, and more accessible for suppliers and buyers for that matter. It is based on 3 pillars of building a modern procurement foundation, and then delivering a simpler, more responsive, and more accessible procurement system, and advancing socioeconomic goals by increasing competition and fostering innovation. So there's a lot of information that could be looked at on there. All you have to do is go through our central website, which is canada.ca, and access it through federal procurement. And you can find more information on that. And we provide more information through our seminars and webinars that I'm going to talk to you briefly. So as the next step, if we can go to the next slide, knowing the context of all of how things work overall, what are the things that you need to consider? Sorry, I jumped over green procurement. One of the important things that government is doing is actually looking at green procurement and integrating environmental considerations into the federal procurement decision-making. So as part of the whole of government's greening government strategy, which is led by Treasury Board, which is committed to aid in transitioning to a net zero circular economy through green procurement, that includes a life cycle assessment principles and the adoption of clean tech technologies and green products and services. The strategy sets specific targets for the governments to, for example, we've done that for light duty vehicle purchases. So started in 2019, the 75% of the light duty administrative fleet vehicle purchases are zero emission vehicles now, or hybrids, while all the new executive vehicles that have been purchased are ZEVs or hybrids as well. So green procurement prioritizes commodities that will have the greatest overall impact in reducing plastic waste, for example, and ensuring that where plastics are produced, they are recyclable and manufactured from recycled content. So we're trying to contribute to the broader Government of Canada mandate by purchasing and utilizing our purchasing power to reduce in this area on the plastic side. And then finally, the government is implementing smart buildings. And if you don't know, as I mentioned, we are in the building space, real property managers of all our assets. So a technology that improves the way mechanical heating and cooling systems and lighting systems in federal buildings are being looked at across the country and are monitored and controlled in order to bring efficiencies to these systems. So that's what we're doing on the green and clean tech side of things, and helping contribute to the green economy, green procurement mandate that we have. So how do you find these opportunities? There's only one central source. I know Jody introduced me about doing presentations on buy and sell. That website is now sunsetting, so it's still in operation, but we're moving now fully over to Canada Buys. When we do procurements, we do competitive procurements, And even for less than $25,000, we do procurement through competitive means. And we use methods of supply kind of known to most through requests for proposals. But then there's some qualification methods of supply Canada uses to pre-qualify suppliers to have you ready in certain commodities where we buy a lot of product or service often enough. We create these pools or qualification pools or methods of supply, as they're called, that are known as standing offers and supply arrangements. I'm not going to go into these, but essentially you pre-qualify. And if you're not qualified in these methods of supply, then we wouldn't be able to source you out. And we do this because we do a lot of bulk buying in this area, and it's not efficient to go out for RFPs all the time for IT or environmental remediation for that matter. So we have pre-qualified methods that suppliers can easily look to qualify on. If we could keep going to the next slide. I know in the interest of time, I'll skip over some of these. Just again, to reiterate, it's always about access to competition and fairness. Although we do compete most of the contracts, we still can do low dollar procurements that are non-competitive, sole source contracts where it makes sense to us. But we even strive to achieve to do competitive procurement in that regard as well. But it is a niche area for smaller businesses to look at to promote themselves for these lower dollar opportunities to get that experience and be able to compete and show representable projects that they've done. Next slide, please. So I did start to talk about the transition from buy and sell to Canada Buys. The new government electronic tendering service is Canada Buys. So I encourage you to go to Canada Buys and look to register, to set up your search parameters to try and find all of federal procurement. Contracting opportunities are going to be posted on Canada Buys moving forward. It's easy to do. Our team offers a webinar on how to do that and how to walk you through it. So I encourage you to take that. Next slide, please. Just in wrapping up, the benefits of GETS, it's no registration. It's easy to use, plain language document. It's linked to our primary electronic tendering service, which is SAP Ariba. You register, you create your profile, and you create your tracking mechanisms for opportunities that you will be notified through email notifications or RSS feeds, and then you'll get those notifications without doing too much work. Next slide. Yeah, so how do you learn more about the procurement process? If we can go to the next slide. It's just these are the service offerings that we have. We have free webinars throughout the month, starting on the first Wednesday on the fundamentals, 2 hours long. I encourage you to take part in those, get the context, and then build whatever strategy that you want to get involved and engaged in. The first one is doing business. The second one's all about understanding, reading solicitation documents, walking through hypothetical examples of evaluation grids and all of that. So that's important as well. And then supplying professional services to the government of Canada has everything to do with supplying professional services. And then the last one of the month is obtaining security clearance, which can be a hindrance to a lot of people. Contact us. We also do one-on-one sessions. And I encourage you, if you really want to start a discussion and get some specifics done, book those appointments or call us or email us, and we'll set those one-on-one appointments. So I was here today. Next slide, please. We're located all across Canada. And you can reach us through any of our regional offices. Just go on to our contact information above. In Ontario region, we're located in Toronto, but we can certainly assist you in that regard. And we're invited here today to just give you an overview of some of the concepts that you might need to be faced with to get doing business with the government of Canada, what we're doing in that green space, which is quite a lot, and you'll be seeing a lot more of the greening opportunities in the short-term future.
Amazing.
Sorry,
Thank
I
you
took a
very
little bit
much,
of time.
Manny.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
thank you. And so we're going to keep pushing forward in the interest of time. So Mark, I'd like to introduce now to speak about Defence Construction Canada.
Thanks, Jody. Thanks for inviting me. Yeah, I'm Mark Smith. I don't need to introduce myself because you introduced me quite nicely. So thanks. This presentation, if you want to go to the next slide, is really meant to be kind of a DCC 101, introduce you to who we are. Not a lot of people have heard of us. And again, how to find our opportunities. And a lot of what Manny has spoken about is relevant for us as well. But So who is Defense Construction Canada? We are a Crown Corporation. We've been around for about 70 years. We deliver infrastructure and environmental projects on behalf of our principal client, which is the Department of National Defense, who also happen to be the custodian of one of the largest real property portfolios in the federal government. So D&D purchases a lot of stuff. Fighter jets and boats and equipment. That's not what we purchase. We purchase infrastructure, or we deliver infrastructure projects to support the Canadian Forces mission. We operate at an arm's length from the department on a fee-for-basis fee-for-service basis. So DCC employees manage the procurement process. We manage the contracts. But private sector companies and consultants are the ones who actually perform the work and execute the contracts that we award. Next slide. We have 33 sites across Canada. So wherever there is a Canadian Forces base or wing, you will find a DCC presence. We are broken up into regions, so you can see there where our regional offices are, and our headquarters are in Ottawa, where I'm coming from today. Next slide. In terms of our annual contract volume, on an annual basis, we make contract payments of roughly $1 billion a year. On average, we award a little over 1,700 contracts per year in construction, architecture and engineering, environmental, FM, energy performance, and services and goods contracts. Roughly around 50 to 60% of those contracts are construction contracts. And you can see just from the breakdown there that the majority of those are, what we would call low dollar value opportunities. So construction opportunities that are tendered under the $1 million mark. Next slide, please. So, just some examples of some of our projects, construction of jetties and wharves and hangars and training facilities, Canadian Forces housing, heavy civil work on roads and parking, we do runway construction, runway repair, underground utilities. We like to think of Canadian Forces bases as little mini municipalities. And so all of the work that goes into running a small town or city, all the maintenance, all the construction, that the same stuff applies to a Canadian Forces base, and a lot of that work is procured by Defense Construction Canada. Next slide. So in terms of what drives D&D's sustainable development goals, I just wanted to highlight some of their policies. So it kind of trickles down from like this pan-Canadian framework, but really when it comes to D&D, they have their strong, secure, engaged defense policy. And from that, they actually have a defense, energy, and environmental strategy document and a green building directive. The Defense, Energy, and Environment Strategy document is available on the internet. I've included a link here in these slides. I don't know if these slides will be circulated later, but I could also put the link in the chat. So, in terms of what is DCC doing, well, we are reacting to the requirements of our principal client partner, the Department of National Defense. So they are striving to meet government greening goals, and we are there to support them and procure these projects. So next slide. Just wanted to highlight some of the greening government key targets. I guess the main one for this audience would be the the waste one, the last one. And the aspiring to divert 75% of non-hazardous operational waste and plastic from landfills by 2025 or sooner, and then by 2050, diverting at least 90% by weight of all construction and demolition waste from landfills. Next slide. So next couple slides, I just wanted to highlight a couple of projects that I thought might be of interest. This one was constructed in 2019. It's a net zero carbon ready project at CFB Gagetown in New Brunswick. It is built at a cost of $41 million. It's D&D's first net zero ready facility. It has solar array, you can see there for green energy. It is LEED Silver certified. Has geothermal heating, and the target greenhouse savings are 116 tons. So, this just an example of a building that DCC helped deliver to the department to help meet some of their greening goals. Next slide, please. And this one, there's a lot of information. I apologize. There's a lot of text on this slide. The reason I wanted to highlight this one is this was done under this D&D's IDEAS program, which is Innovation for Defense Excellence and Security. This is a program where the department wants to test drive innovative ideas and test their readiness for wide scale deployment in other across their their real property portfolio. So the objective of this project was to retrofit a building to install and operate low carbon energy generation system for heating the existing building, and so they chose a building in CFB Kingston. And again, the reason I wanted to highlight this project is because this is a case where D&D or DCC put a considerable amount of effort into the procurement evaluation or the RFP evaluation criteria in order to choose a proponent with the most innovative but also readiness, high degree of readiness solution. So just in the interest of time, I won't go through all of the criteria that I listed here, but there are, I sort of highlighted 6 on the slide. But basically we had the proponents propose an innovative solution, attest to its degree of readiness. The solution had to fit within the site constraints of the building. It had to be able to provide automated digital performance monitoring data so that over a 2-year period, they could kind of monitor the effectiveness of the solution, which is kind of the whole idea behind this IDEAS program. So the successful firm ended up being Black & McDonald, and this was awarded, I believe, last fiscal year. Next slide. So in terms of finding our opportunities, we do differ a little bit from PSPC and what Manny was talking about. We advertise all of our opportunities on mercs.com, the Mercs platform. The reason why we do so is because we were early adopters of doing electronic bidding, and the Canada Buys platform didn't offer that to us. So we went to Mercs, and they were able to deliver an electronic bidding solution for us. So if you're looking for opportunities, I encourage you to go to mercs.com or mercs.com/DCC to kind of go to DCC's landing page, and you'll see all of our exclusively our opportunities. There's also a search function in Mercs where you can search for DCC or specific Canadian Forces locations. We will post on Canada Buys, the new Canada Buys platform, when the value of opportunities exceeds Canada's international trade agreement thresholds. But those ads always point you to Mercs. So next slide, please. So there is a cost to doing business on Mercs. You need to have a subscription to Mercs in order to view opportunities and to bid on opportunities. There is a pay-as-you-go one-time fee if you want to go that route, but the most cost-effective way is to get a subscription, and the most affordable subscription is an organizational level subscription. So for $4 a month, you can sign up just to see DCC's opportunities. If you choose one of the local or regional national subscriptions, then you get to see all the opportunities that are posted on Mercs, not just DCC's. Next slide, please. Manny touched on this really briefly, and I won't spend a lot of time. But a lot of work. Working on a Canadian Forces base, there are often times where holding a security clearance is a requirement of being awarded a contract. The clearances are issued by PSPC's Contract Security Program. Contractors can apply to the program who are, wish to get a clearance, can apply and be sponsored by DCC through that process. We publish these things called advanced procurement notices on MERCs that basically alert contractors about upcoming opportunities that have a security requirement, in order to give you guys enough lead time in order to get that clearance, because it does take time to get a DOS reliability clearance, which is the most basic level of security, can take up to 4 months. So we do try to give adequate notice to industry so that they can get that process started. And if you have questions about that, by all means, you can contact me after this. Next slide. I wanted to give a quick plug to these open construction source lists, because this is another way of doing business with us. Because of changes to the Official Languages Act, it's impacting how we can support our client. So basically at every base and wing across Canada, we're creating an open construction source list. So we're encouraging vendors and suppliers to register for these, and starting next month, and well, next week, basically any construction opportunity valued under $10 million will be tendering through the open construction source list. So only firms that are registered will receive an invitation to view and bid on these opportunities. So if these are some, if working with DCC is something that interests you, I would encourage you to go to MERC's, search OCSL, Open Construction Source List. You'll see 31 of these things. It's free to register. We just ask a couple of questions, and then you'll be privy to these invitations. Next slide. I've basically covered this, so next slide. This is my last slide. A quick plug. Jody had mentioned my involvement with Indigenous, increasing Indigenous participation on DCC and D&D projects. The federal government mandate that a minimum of 5% of the total value of all federal contracts is allocated to Indigenous businesses is a really important initiative, and we've done our best to support our client partner in meeting that. So yeah, just a couple key stats. Since the start of the fiscal year 2019-2020 up to today, we've awarded 226 contracts to Indigenous owned businesses with a combined value of 126 million. We've tendered an additional 26 contracts that have an Indigenous benefit plan. So that's not set aside for Indigenous businesses, but there's a requirement for the general contractor to sub portions of the work out to Indigenous businesses. And last year, we exceeded the 5% target by hitting 7.3, and we're on track to do better than that this fiscal year. So we're really proud of our achievement. And yeah, I think that's my last slide.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you so much. I got a bunch of questions, but I'm going to hold my tongue so that I can introduce the next speaker, Kal Tire. So Darryl, I'll let you take it away.
Okay, appreciate it. Thanks very much, Jody. So as we go through this is an example for those out there to kind of see how circularity can emerge out of something that wasn't there before. And just for those who don't know, Kal Tire is headquartered in the Okanagan in British Columbia. It's a nationwide company, 4,500 employees, and we have global operations, just to get a sense of scope and where we're coming from. Next slide. So our circularity roadmap is really tire focused, and it's about retaining the value of tires. And so when we're looking at not just selling tires, but about taking tires and maintaining that value through various technologies and investing in those new technologies. So in the past, we'd manufacture a tire, use a tire, maybe recycle a tire, turn it into a playground or a road map or a pair of weights, and then they go off to landfill. Now, what we're really looking at is a perpetual cycle that allows tires to make tires somewhat indefinitely through new value retention processes and through materials and products. Next slide. So just to get a scope of what we're dealing with in Canada over the last 10 years, we've collected about 10 billion pounds of tires. And we don't get a lot of manufacturing benefit because we don't make a lot of tires in Canada, but we certainly need to deal with the waste. And it's a waste that doesn't degrade. It's inert in nature. That tire swing we may have used as a kid is still hanging there, and it will be doing so for another couple hundred years if we don't do something with it. And it's important to understand that 1 billion tires coming in ends up in landfill unless we turn to circularity. Next slide, Jody. So the commercial tire area is where I work. And it's important to realize we don't think of tires the same way we think of other polymers. And so I throw this up to say one commercial tire is worth 5,600 single-use water bottles. And very few of us now will throw a water bottle, a plastic bottle in the trash. We're all moving towards recycling, but we don't think the same about our tires. We just think about getting rid of them. We don't think about where they go. And that's where technology comes in and the movement towards circularity. Jody? So to get a bit of background, the picture up in the corner, that's Sir Henry Wickham. He was part of the British Empire way back when, and he stole seeds from Brazil and took the entire, what is now 85% of the rubber industry over to Asia, particularly Malaysia, Thailand, and Indonesia. And in that is we've created a critical resource. We now have a large amount of rubber coming from one place in the world. Approximately 80 to 90% of all the rubber comes from there. And they all come from a very small batch of seeds, which creates a critical resource, not just from climate change, but also from the biodiversity of the seeds to which those plants have come from. So critical resources is what rubber is, and we need to understand that to move circularity farther and faster in understanding the story. Jody? So there's 3 technologies that Kal Tire is invested in and continues to develop. And I want to go through those so you understand how circularity can add to the rubber story. Slide. So the first is retreading. And for those who aren't too familiar with the tire world, when you use a tire and you consume that tire, you burn off a certain amount of rubber into the environment. It doesn't really burn off, it just becomes micro rubber and goes off to the environment. When that tire is consumed, it can be retreaded, which means we can put a new tread on it and give it a second life. It's the original recycling or circularity model that's been going on for many, many decades. And the technology continues to improve to make this better and better. And so while we've been involved in this and always known as the better and best choice, there's more we can do for circularity, because sooner or later, that tire can't be retreaded and it has to move forward. So then what do you do then to keep it circular? Jody? So in that, we know that retreading will save up to 80% carbon. So when we're talking about reducing GHGs globally, we can retread. And so compared to buying a new tire, which we might do, we want to really retread on the commercial level, particularly, so that we can do that and maintain that. But the more carbon can be saved through the use of reclaimed rubber. So vulcanization, if you're not too familiar, leads to what's called devulcanization. So vulcanization, created by the fella up in the corner, his name is Goodyear. You might be familiar with the name. Not the guy who owns the company. This is an inventor who died penniless. The name was used later on. And so vulcanization creates the rigid structure within rubber by adding sulfur bonds. Devulcanization is to break those bonds. And it's existed for quite some time using very harsh chemicals that wouldn't be appropriate in the Canadian environment. Other countries have been devulcanizing using chemicals for a very long time. And so in combination with the University of Waterloo, Kal Tire is invested in devulcanization that's clean and doesn't use chemicals. And in doing that, we're able to now commercialize devulcanization. And the question is what does devulcanization actually do for rubber? Jody? So when you take a tire and you buff it off or you break it down, you collect that rubber pieces, it's kept in a closed loop system at Kal Tire within our system. Then we have to take it down to size, and that granular then creates through the process, which is the far picture on the side, a rubber sheet. And that's devulcanized rubber, which means it can now be reshaped, reformed, and created rigidity through curing or the vulcanization process. So as you go through this process of devulcanization, What's really important is what goes in has to be the same quality of what comes out within a closed loop system. And so what it's really about capturing rubber and keeping it as clean as possible to move it through the system. And devulcanization is a way of putting rubber back directly into tires as a new material process. Jody? So if we imagine, just to break this down, you're going to bake a cake. Most of us have had this experience or at least watched someone do it. So you get your flour, your eggs, your butter, you mix it into a batter. That's like making a compound of rubber. You put it in to cure or to bake, and then you consume that rubber product or the cake. Devulcanization takes the cake and turns it back into batter by breaking down the bonds. So you can create a circular loop from the tire back into other rubber products, particularly tires' highest value retention. The other thing that you can do once you can only do that so long with so much. After that, we have to turn to thermal conversion. And thermal conversion takes that cake and turns it back into base ingredients. And some of you may have heard of thermal conversion or pyrolysis through other polymer industries like plastics. And the same thing can be done with rubber. And it breaks it back down into its butter, its milk, and basic elements, which might be carbon black, oil, steel, and so forth. And so by investing in these technologies, we're able to create circularity where tires can continually make tires with less and less materials being taken from the earth and less materials getting down to the disposal side of the tire system. Next slide. Here's a quick picture of what a thermal conversion or our thermal conversion project looks like. And we're currently doing this in Chile. The reason why we're building this out in Chile is because there's legislation around collection of tires is a little bit farther along than what Canada is. They're moving towards a system where you can no longer shred tires, but tires have to be moved towards a better technology. Shredding tires simply creates one extra life or recycling, but then it ends up in landfill. And that's not the circular model that we're all shooting for. Next slide. So just to get a sense of what that looks like from a cradle to grave perspective, when we do a life cycle analysis on tires, we're really about taking those raw materials, transporting them, manufacturing, using them, and then we're creating a sustainable loop in medium truck and OTR or commercial business through devulcanized technology. And then by collecting those buffings or grinding that tire, we can now move it through thermal conversion, creating two loops so that rubber never gets past that little red line. Once rubber passes that red line, it becomes a downstream product and it ends up being burned, landfilled, or spread as mulch in a garden. Anything that happens after that, there's no collection for rubber. It all ends up in landfill. And so what we want to do is stop it before it gets past that point of no return. And tires make up 80% of the rubber usage that we have. Next slide. The last thing that we're able to do, particularly after you get an understanding of the life cycle analysis, is we can go to customers and we can help them understand what their scope 3 carbon emissions are. And scope 3 are very difficult. Many companies are focused on scope 1 and 2, particularly in certain industries like mining or oil and gas. And doing scope 3 emissions analysis allows them to understand not only what those start to look like, but start to frame up how we can start working together to reduce those emissions through using technologies that are far more circular in nature. And as an example of how we're taking an industry that was primarily used as a single consumable element that goes from tire to landfill after a single use, we're now creating these circular technologies within Canada that allow us to truly take better value from those tires and reuse that value perpetually into the future. So it serves and stands as an example, Kal Tire, and what we're up to in the circular economic area. Thanks, Jody.
Amazing. Thank you so much. I got a quick question before Shirley launches into the couple questions that we got. Just curious, like, how did you, and for anybody else that's on this call that's trying to find the first step to begin their journey towards circularity, like, how did you get started on this whole journey for Kal Tire? Like, what was your first step?
You know, I think the first step was understanding that there is good business in doing the right thing. And circularity is one of those things that was recognized as having many players, collection of tires, selling of tires, distribution of tires, all the way through. And it's very disjointed. And then so in trying to understand that system of supply, we came to understand many opportunities towards circularity and found great partners who helped us move towards that particular momentum forward. So it was really about getting to understand the supply chain and how that impacted our business.
Okay, thanks. Okay, Shirley, did you want to?
Yeah, I have a question from Mark. It's from Michonne Nodo. Sorry, I'm probably brutalizing that name. The question is related to what is the criteria related to circular economy that you have been using and how are you evaluating them? And that's to Mark.
Yeah. I had to do a little research actually leading up to this lunch and learn to see what we were doing, because the truth is that we haven't done a lot of evaluation criteria around the circular economy, and yeah, so we haven't done a lot of like customized or specialized evaluation criteria, which is why I wanted to highlight that one project about the retrofit of the heating system for that building. That's one of the, right now at least, one of the rare cases where we sort of built customized evaluation criteria, around seeking an innovative solution there. So we're asking industry to kind of tell us, yeah, what innovative ideas they have, and sort of again test to their readiness. So I think right now, when we procure for these types of projects, D&D's scope of work or their specs will reflect the fact that they want buildings to be LEED certified, net zero ready. And so to date, we've sort of been letting their documentation kind of say, like, this is what the requirement is. And our evaluation criteria has just been like, show us some past projects, give us resumes for your key personnel, give us an approach and method. It hasn't really been geared towards teasing out proponents' expertise in achieving, net zero and LEED and that sort of thing. So I think it's going to evolve over the next couple of years.
Yeah.
Sorry, it's not probably the answer you're looking for, but I think it's an evolving thing.
Well, there's a slight follow-up question, and that's related to the fact that the circular economy is still new, as we know, and especially in public procurement. Have you developed, or are you considering developing, a training program for your procurement staff, but also for other staff who would be asking the procurement unit to issue the tenders?
Mm-hmm. Good question.
It is a good question. One that I don't know the answer to, unfortunately, but I think it's a great idea. I think
I could jump in if you want.
Yeah,
on our side,
that'd be great.
Yeah, so it's a good question, and again, the circular economy is a new idea to procurement and in particular to governments as well. I know others have adopted it. Canada's looking at ways to contribute as well. We do have a surplus program that we've developed for products that we buy so that they don't end up in the landfill sites, and then projects that integrate part of the circularity into it, where for our buildings we procure goods from birth, use, and then reuse instead of going to landfills, like carpeting, for example, and other products in that. In regards to educating our procurement teams on this, so again, our team here has partnered with CIC, and Jody's made presentations to our key, environmental stewardship committee, people that are involved in projects that tie in with environmental information that lead to projects that they're going to be working on, which then are tied to procurement teams that are aware of green opportunities and circularity as well. And there's also a unit that's been developed in our headquarters, the Social Procurement Policy Directorate. And in there too, they have expertise where they're educating key buyers on circularity as well. So it is new, but it's in the forefront of our minds. We all have to do what we need to do to lower our carbon footprint, and that comes through purchasing wisely and greenly along the whole process.
I know we're a little over time, but I just wanted to ask, there's a question here for you, Darryl. Does Kal Tire conduct any community collection drives for old tires, or would you consider doing that kind of thing?
Yeah, quick answer to that is collections are provincial in nature, so it depends where one lives, what we can do. But the easy answer is every Kal Tire is a community collection site for tires. They won't turn away old tires to be recycled, reused, and sent downstream for circularity. So that's the quick and easiest cross-country answer, as opposed to getting into drives, which can be provincially difficult depending on where it is.
And then just one last question here regarding uniforms. So I'm assuming we're talking about especially sort of for government uniforms, that the understanding is there is a lot of uniforms largely still being purchased from China, despite the efforts for Canada's textile manufacturing sector to be circular. I don't know if any of you have anything to say about that quickly in 1 minute, or whether we could take this offline and provide a more fulsome answer afterwards.
Just to say, I mean, procurements vary, right? So we're obligated to do procurement openly, fairly, competitively, and tied to our international trade agreements as well. We evaluate based on competition and pricing. So whether it's an overseas company that wins the contract, we don't have a buy local policy. That's what I'm trying to allude to. And we're governed by the trade agreements that we have in place with other jurisdictions for that reciprocal trade between our countries. So Canadian companies can benefit and they can benefit here. So if contracts for textiles, clothing, uniforms is being let out that way, there may be provisions where we look at future down the road considerations for Canadian content. But again, we have to consider the trade obligations. At least that's
Yeah.
Okay, that's it for us then, Jody. No more questions.
Thank you everybody for joining us today. A copy of the slide deck will be shared following this webinar, and you have the contact information. So if you have any other burning questions, feel free to reach out to our speakers. I hope that's okay, speakers. And then reach out to us. We're always happy to help in any way that we can. So thank you and enjoy your afternoon.
Thank you, Jody. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.